Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Enneagram Restored Podcast. I am your very good-looking 5'4" man who does it all: interior designer, podcaster, substitute teacher, great cook, great singer, all around just a fantastic and talented person. Host Braylon Williams. And I want to say from the very outstart of this podcast, thank you once again for joining me for another episode. If you're new to this podcast, this is a podcast that I put out just to talk about the Enneagram, which is a personality typing indicator system, and how it is, like, in my opinion, the best thing to help us learn more about ourselves and kind of grow from where we are. I always say that the Enneagram is best used in order to make the good of our personality better and the bad of our personality good. So there's that. And I always like to, before I jump into talking about the show and talking about the topic for the day, call this weekend of my life. Summer is here. School is out. So I've just kind of been at home doing nothing. So life right now, at the time I'm recording this, of course, you're hearing this at like in July, but right now it's the first Saturday in June. June's 1st is when I'm recording this. And so this past week has really been kind of just a mundane wake up, wash dishes, eat some food, repeat, rinse, wash, and repeat, all type of thing. But that changes this week because there's a lot of things on my calendar. And then of course, here I am recording this episode. So, but speaking of this episode, you see a little bit different. It has long been a thing where, for my podcast, for this podcast, I always record a video version of this podcast whenever I have a guest on. And that has been a theme since I first started this podcast. And that was going to be the thing that I continue to do. But I was thinking a couple weeks ago, it's like, hey, why not just record even when it's just me on the screen? So trying something new out. And every episode of this podcast for this season, at least, will have a video version and an audio only version. So you can watch this podcast on YouTube, and then you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. So just a wide way of distribution, a wide way of a lot more people of hearing the goodness of this podcast and hearing me talk for about an hour to an hour and a half. So don't get bored. I promise you won't. I'm a fun person in spirit. But with that being said, this is episode 2 of season 4. Last week, I just want to say again, thank you to my friend Adam Kennedy. He came with some packed punch questions, and he touched on some things that I want to touch on some more now in this episode. But that was a great conversation, great time. So I'm going to have to do it again. I don't know if you listen, but if you are, we're going to have to do that again. But anyway, for today's episode, I've entitled it Now What? And the reason why I entitled it Now What is because, as I said last week, and in the trailers before, this entire season of the podcast, the overarching theme, the idea behind it all is active waiting, is waiting seasons. And what does that mean when we wait? So we've had an idea, we've kind of did a flyby aerial view over this entire subject last week, a little bit. But today I want to start getting to nitty gritty of it and kind of pinpoint how each type might enter into and how they might come to accept a waiting season. And I think the best way to go about this topic is to approach it from 2 views. From the harmonic groups, which is how each type handles conflict. And then from the other view is the stances, how each type is in relationships. So just to kind of briefly recap what those are. So in the harmonic groups, you have the compliant group, you have the withdrawing group, and you have the nope, I said those wrong. In the stances, you have the assertive, withdrawn, um, compliant, and the harmonic, you have the competency, positive outlook, and I forgot the other one. But ones, fours, and sevens are in. No, I said that wrong. Let me pull up my cheat sheet because I am completely losing my way. You would think, as long as I've been studying the Enneagram, that remembering these things would not be that tough. All right, let's start over from the top. Harmonic groups are how each type handles conflict, and you have the positive outlook group, which is composed of 2s, 7s, and 9s. Competency group is composed of 1s, 3s, and 5s, and the reactive group is composed of 4s, 6s, and 8s. And then the stances are also known as the Hornevian groups. You have the compliant group, which is 1, 2, and 6. The withdrawn group, which is 4, 5, and 9. And then the assertive group, which is 3, 7, and 8. And I'm not going to go into what all those things mean now, because you can go back a couple of seasons. I did a complete episode on both those groups in depth. So if you want to know more about that, I think those are both in season 2 is when I did those, maybe season 3. So you just scroll to the list of episodes on Apple Podcast or Spotify. You will find it. It's titled Harmonic Group or stances. So it's very easy to find. But with that being said, I'm going to go around the circle, starting with type 1. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Just because, typically a lot of times when we talk about the Enneagram, it's 8s, 9s, 1s, and all that. But I think I'll switch it up and start with 1s. So, as a type within the competency group, 1s strive to be correct. So, knowing that this is like their thing, you can just already from the very outset start to see how they might be challenged when a waiting season is upon them. How they might, be like, what is wrong? That question, what is wrong? What happened? Where did I get off track? Because something that they might think in their mind is like, I've done everything right. Why am I not getting the right thing now in life? Why am I in this moment of waiting when I've done everything by the book, when I've tried to my darnest best to go step by step? Everything should be aligning because I went by the book. So that correctness, that perfectionism, is going to come to tension with the relaxedness, with the going of the flow that comes with being in a waiting season. And I am probably a good source to say how a waiting season is just really just going with the flow. You just wake up every day. It's like, what's there to do? And then you do that, and it's like, what's next? So a waiting season for any type, but especially for a 1, is a moment of knowing that there is no perfect way of getting through it. It's just a trial and error type of thing. You have to work at it. You have to be willing to try. As Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try. But in this case, there is a try, because that's all you can do. Doing is trying in a waiting season. So, but when they throw in how that emotionally and relationally starts to look for them in a waiting period, they get this sense of wishy-washy, and like they are going to go, and because they're like, all right, I don't know what's going on with me. I don't know what's going on in my life. I've got to attach to myself to someone who seems stable so I can regain my autonomy, so I can regain my sense of self again. So the question comes in this moment as 1 enters a waiting season is, relationally at least, is that can I find a stable relationship to cling to? Um, because then there's something that I can do right. There's something I can do for sure by the book and get it right. So that should work out. And then by doing that, my autonomy, my independence comes back to me. So that's just a little bit. I probably can go a lot way deeper than that, but I promise you, um, I said this time as I've been recording guest episodes with guests that this is a subject that it's a tough, abstract subject to grasp anyway. Waiting, liminal space, but then you attach it to the Enneagram, and as far as I know, and I've been following Enneagram for 3 or 4 years now, I've heard moments of brief discussion on waiting and liminal space attached to the Enneagram, but as far as I'm aware, I'm probably the first person to really go in depth and say, hey, how is waiting, how is liminal space working in alignment to our types? So that um, there's a lot of this stuff I'm probably gonna get wrong. If you feel like this is I missed the mark on something, please let me know, because maybe I said something wrong about ones. I'm not one to bail from, hey, yeah, I got that wrong, because this, like I said, this is a basically a new idea, discussing this topic in relation to the Enneagram. So um, I'm open to hearing what I may have, could have considered differently. So, but moving on to type two. Type twos are a part of the positive outlook group. So they're going to put an emphasis on their positive self image, on how good they look, everything. Um, Disregard the negative of themselves, but all right, here's all the positive. I always say that twos and threes share this aspect together, because threes are essentially the same way, and spinning in themselves to look the best for whatever group they are in. But for a two, it doesn't matter who they're next to. They're not going to shapeshift like who they are. For somebody, twos, on the other hand, are going to just emphasize their positivity, whereas threes might shape shift their personality a little bit to match that social sphere they are in that moment. So, but as a two enters into a waiting season, their world might be falling apart, but they're going to be sure that others only experience the positivity of their nature. Um, they're not going to allow others to see that how this season, how this moment of liminal space might be affecting them inwardly, because externally it is all sunshine, rainbows. How can I help you when I need help the most right now? For two, there's this wall, and the wall separates who they really are from that moment to who that shell of a person is. So the shell of the person is, hey, I'm good. My life is a-okay, 1,000% and better. But I know you need my help still. So what can I do to help you? Oh, you need me to bake this cake for you, take it to your friend who's sick. Or you need to, okay, I can start that meal train. Yeah, I can do that. All the while, internally, they are breaking into 1,000 million pieces. The positivity, and in this moment, is going to make them uh, I'm getting a thought here that I did not write down, so I'm trying to really get it. So this extra sense of positivity that a two um, is going to exhibit, is going to exude in a moment of waiting season uh, is really going to be their effort to get help. They're not going to say bluntly and straightforwardly that, hey, I'm struggling, I need help. But they're going to be hoping that somebody's going to have x-ray vision, per se, um, to see through what they're doing and to give them attention. So, uh, this requires deep work for all the types. Um, Engaging and waiting requires very deep work, no matter if you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. Liminal spaces, waiting seasons are tough. They're meant to slow you down so you can catch yourself and see where you're going. And I say that as somebody who is currently um, in the thick of it. Like, when I entered my waiting season a couple years ago, I had no idea that it would still be going on to this day, but it is. And honestly, I think that's just partly my fault because I'm not really attuned into what was happening and just pushing past. Um, that threeness in me is like, hey, keep going, gotta keep working, gotta get the next thing, gotta achieve the next thing. So, but that's a whole different discussion for another thing. But speaking of threes, uh, and myself, earlier this year, I started to fiddle with the idea that I may have mistyped myself. If you've listened to this podcast before, you might have heard me say that I identify as an 8, and that has been the case for many years, from the moment I discovered the Enneagram in 2019. Not when I discovered it, but when I started studying in 2019, I've always kind of considered myself an 8. So, um, but here again, experience speaks to the masses. Uh, this waiting season allowed me to contemplate on a thought that was given to me through a counselor at one point in time. I was telling my counselor one time back at Evangel that I aspired to be POTUS, President of the United States. And she asked me why. I was like, this and this and this. And she was like, are you sure you're not a 3? And so thank her for planting that seed in my head. But years down the road, even then, I disregarded it because I was too busy to take out time to think. Possibly contemplation, self meditation, just going. Didn't slow down enough to really think about it. But then here I am at the beginning of this year, forcing myself into intentional solitude, and it just really allowed me to say, "Hey, yeah, maybe this is worth looking into." And so here I am now. As much time as I spent studying the Enneagram, now I identify as A3 and not an 8, and so I'm really learning how to get through life through the lens of a 3, because for so long I put on the lenses of an 8, and so I've been seeing the world um, through an 8ness. But naturally, I've always wanted to see the world through a 3 lens. But by mistyping myself, I was blinding myself to what was really there. So, and that just kind of came out of nowhere. That's nowhere even in my notes. But the thing that is in my notes is that when I was contemplating early this year, the possibility of me being a 3 and not an 8, one of the points of interest, I was like, hey, what is the difference? That could probably be the like check mark to say, yes, this is what I am. Is I was looking at how 3s and how 8s were in each Enneagram group. So I was looking at how an 8 was in harmonic, the Hornevian stances, the harmony groups. I was looking at how 3s, what their things were in each of those groups. But when I started to look at the competency group, which is where threes live, I started to realize that that's how I've been getting through this waiting season. Uh, and this is how a lot of threes might feel the same way too. I know this is something that Adam voiced last week in that our episode together, is that what can we do to be efficient in this season? What task can we get at hand to say, hey, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna be prepared for when I come out of this season. I'm not going to waste the season, but even though there might not be nothing for me to really work at, there's things that I can do to work at. Now, you're probably saying that made no sense. But for me, it did because I'm a three. And so every other three might be saying, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But I say all that to round it back to this. As a three entering a waiting season, they might begin to ask themselves, how can I make this moment in time? How can I make this waiting season? How can I make this liminal space efficient forever? Forever, how long it may last? What can I do to be prepared for once it comes out? When I come out of it, and so, and then relationally, threes are a certain type, and so even in this waiting season, again, they're going to assert themselves to be efficient if they're in relationships. But and then coming out, that mode of efficiency that they reached in that liminal space in that waiting season, is all, it's just really relationally is going to get even more assertive when they come out, because they're going to be like, hey, I've got all this done. You can either move along with me or you can get plowed over by this plow truck, because I've been waiting for this moment. I've been waiting to really get at the work that I've been preparing to do. So really not taking account uh, those in relationship with them. But on the flip side, speaking from personal experience, as a three who is not in a relationship during a waiting season, um, this is a good time to slow even more, and to say, hey, how have I been asserting myself into relationships? But then not only that is how have I been interacting? Um, One of the things that I've come to realize is that, in short, let's just say it this way, is uh, a lot of times in my life, I fall in with friend groups just because they were convenient for me and they were near proximity. Um, Never really going to that level of friendship that I desire, but sticking with friends who may not give me what I want just because, hey, they're right there. They're close in proximity. And to get the friendship that I want, that requires me to take time out of what I'm trying to achieve, um, and career and stuff like that, educationally, to advance my overall life, to really achieve that. Um, for three, relationships really aren't something that's going to be paramount. That's going to be um, important. Uh, Threes don't see relationships as necessary unless that relationship is going to get them their goal. And so a friendship per se is not 99% of the time, a friendship is not going to be valuable to a three because of the fact, what value is it going to add to their pursuits of happiness? And that could be entrepreneurial, that could be business wise, that could be what the final educational degree that they want. Do they want three PhDs? A friendship is probably going to hinder that goal more than help it, because relationships take time, relationships take work, and that's just not the type of work that a three is geared towards. A three is geared towards what's going to make them seem valuable, and what that is getting their goals. That's if it's two PhDs, doing that. If it's owning five businesses, that's is doing that. If it's climbing Mount Everest, if they feel that it's going to be that. Uh, but relationships, um, unless they see relationships as adding value to their lives, a three is not going to intentionally um, really try to set their eyes on that. It's going to be something where like, oh yeah, it came as I was doing this, and it just worked out. So very, there's a lot there, a lot to unpack, but I've got to move on. And so I want to move on to fours. Um, Hey everybody, I just want to take a quick break from the show to say that I love having conversations with all of my listeners. And one of the ways that I do this is by engaging through social media. And you can follow the podcast at Enneagram Store Podcast on both Instagram and Facebook. I look forward to engaging with you all more on those platforms. Fours are a type who are in the reactive group alongside sixes and eights. And as a four, they will react to conflict by withdrawing and seeking a supporter. And so, what this means and what this looks like um, is I'm looking, I've wrote notes everywhere. So, I'm looking on my iPad now because I wrote some additional notes. And so, in, in summation of it all, this entering a waiting season for a four is essentially a seeking of external support so they can retreat into their mind's happy place. One thing we know about fives and fours um, is that they're going to retreat mentally um, because they are in a happy place. I always think about fours. Uh, Actually, I'm gonna bring this over. Whenever I think about fours, I think of this book and the cover of it. Really, it's this idea of uniqueness, of splendor within under the skin, um, splendor within the personality, and differences, how they are authentic. So, actually, this is my favorite. It is a children's book, but it's my favorite book of all time. Is The Last of the Really Great Wayne Doodles by Julie Andrews Edwards. But anytime I think of a forward, no matter what the thing I am thinking of, this book cover comes to mind because this is how I imagine a forward thinking. You got this like just colorful, wonderful world awaiting, and me that's what I think a force is going to do. They're going to seek support. So really, that supporter is going to do all the work that might arise in waiting season for them. Um, they're saying, "Hey, I don't want to figure this out. Figure it out for me. I'm gonna just go in my head, and when I come out, we can work together," type of thing. So, but it's I don't want to say that. I had a thought come to mind. But I'm like, yeah, that might lead us down a rabbit hole and make it just a little bit more complicated. So I'm just going to move on to type fives. Let's keep the ball rolling. Um, so fives enter a waiting when they are enter a waiting season. A thing that they might do is start researching everything that they're going through. How like pull out the research into how this liminal space is affecting them emotionally, mentally, physically, what they can do um, through this moment. But here's the thing: they might research what they can do, but more than likely they're not going to implement that research on what they can do. The research is just there. It's just a piece of thing to comfort. Fives find comfort in research. That's an odd thing to say, but not necessarily is a five going to use what they learned from their extensive research. It's just a piece of knowledge to them. Excuse me. Um, and that's the thing. If a five really has a great superpower, especially in a moment of waiting, in a liminal space time of their life, because researching and becoming an expert, waiting seasons are that time. Actively waiting, that's part of the thing. When I say active waiting, that's the thing. When you're active waiting, you're like, hey, what can I do? What is it in my deepest souls that I need to work out and do emotionally? What do I have to understand not only about myself, but about these different things in the human body itself? So being naturally attuned to go and say, hey, what is this on Google? Or say, hey, the science behind emotional stability during a breakdown. Being naturally attuned to wanting to know those things and to research those things can really be beneficial in a waiting season, but they're going to be useless if a five doesn't implement it. So they can learn all they want, but without using it, it's just dead weight in their brain. Honestly, uh, one of the things that I studied psychology a little bit. I took AP psychology in high school, and then I also took a psychology class this past semester. Not this past semester, but last fall. Um, I took some other type of psychology classes. But one of the things that's interesting, and that if you ever take a psychology class, you probably learn this too, is that the synapses, I think is what it's called, right, in our brains, the things that like form when we learn something, you have to repeat that thing over and over for that thing to grow and actually become knowledge. So, in reference of a book, someone can teach me how to read a line, a sentence of a book today. Say, all right, let me pack up. Say I didn't know how to read, and I had a friend come over and say, all right, this is how you read this line in this book. They can do that. But if I never practice reading ever, and then come down the road 3, maybe even 5 years later, I'm still in the same spot because that synapses, that it never grew into something that I can actually do. It Because it just started as a spark. So, and I think I hope I'm using the right terminology, but uh, it's just that visual thing. I should have found a video of that, because that would have been a nice thing to throw up in here, but literally just came to me, so won't worry about it. Or do I want to worry about it? Nah, I won't. So we said a lot, and we got a few more types. Next type is sixes. But before I start talking about the sixes, I will say they the sixes were the hardest type of this entire episode to think about. Like literally, like I got to a point where I was um, strolling back and forth in my apartment, just thinking aloud, like this and that, or this about sixes, or just really, it was tough. I spent at least 2 full days just solely thinking about how do sixes enter a waiting season. So I was a little stumped up by sixes. They didn't come to me as easy as the other ones did. Not saying that the other ones were purely easy, but sixes definitely were not nowhere near easy. But anyway, for a six entering a waiting season, they're going to assess what they have and what they lost due to entering the season. And they will work independently to secure what they have internally and externally so that they don't lose more. The best way that I put it when I was thinking to myself is um, this isn't the thought I had. In fact, when I was thinking about it, I used some business cards that I've got to put into my contacts for people I've met. But I was just here thinking, I was like, little rascals. I've got a pickle. I've got a pickle. I got a pickle. Hey, 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 hey. So I don't know why I just thought about that, but I did. But it helps great. So if you've ever seen Little Rascals, I forget which two characters it is, but they're sitting in, I think, a race car under a tree at their clubhouse, and they're eating pickles, and one of them says, "Hey, can I have your pickle for a nickel?" And so then he has two pickles, and it's like, "I've got a pickle, I've got a pickle, I've got a pickle, hey, 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 hey." That whole thing. It's been a long time since I watched that movie. Might need to watch that tonight. Who knows? Um, but having two pickles, say a six entering waiting season, lost half of one pickle. So now they only have one and a half pickles. They're going to do everything that they know how, and even things that they don't know how yet, but they're going to figure it out. Um, and without asking for help from anyone else to make sure, one, that their happiness that they lost from losing half of a pickle, they don't lose any more happiness because they lost a pickle. Two, they're going to figure out to hold on to that one-and-a-half pickle so that they don't go down to just one pickle or maybe zero pickles. So that's a funny, like, little visual analogy, but it's just thinking that way is what kind of helped me understand sixes in this moment. And even still, like I said, they were the toughest ones for me. So even now, they're still a little bit fuzzy, but thinking in the manner of, hey, I'm gonna hold on to what I have. I don't want to lose it. I don't want to really gain more right now. I just want to stay secure with what I have. Because the thing about a six is, as um, within the what did I say, group they're in, they're seeking security, uh, but that security isn't necessarily like physical security, more like safety, if that makes sense. Um, and when I say safety, uh, you, I want you to think about maybe you're at a concert or at an event and there's security there, but that security isn't there to give you something new that wasn't provided in the terms of your ticket that you purchased. They're there to make sure that you don't lose that experience, that you don't miss out on whatever event or concert is happening because something happened, um, or something does happen. They're there to make sure that you are attended to well. That's the idea of security that a six is seeking. They're not necessarily trying to give you something else. They're not trying to say, hey, you're right here at this concert. Let me give you an additional concert that you didn't pay for. No, that's a six isn't really trying to gain security in the sense of gaining more things, but they're focusing and trying to gain security in the sense, hey, give me what I asked for. Let me keep that. I don't want to lose on that experience type of thing. So it's a holding rather than a gathering type of thing. So, but it's also in this moment of seeking help and allowing themselves. It's in this moment that they have to allow themselves to trust others to help them establish such security. Um, but the thing about it is, not doing this independently and having someone to help you can be very scary for a six. And so, even just the opportunity or even just the idea of allowing someone to help a six through this moment in time looks like an opportunity to invite even more loss and to lose even more security. So that's why what they do independently, because it's the idea I can't really trust somebody else to provide the level of securement, the level of security that I desire. So I've got to do it myself. And if I trust that to somebody, well, then that level that I desire is not the level that I desire because they can't truly give me that. So it's just the idea of holding what they've got, not necessarily gaining more, but holding who they are, where they are, and what they have already. Words cannot express the amount of gratitude that I have for each and every one of my listeners. So, if you would like to support Enneagram Store podcast even more, you can do so by sending a tip by going to enneagramrestore.com /tip jar. That's enneagramrestore.com /tip jar. That's ENNEAGRAMRESTORED.com /TIPJAR. Enneagramrestore.com /tip jar. All right, now we've come to a fun type. Type 7s. Type 7s are like they are the type that I have like in this moment of life, I've really become envious of 7s. Um, and because of where I am right now in life and how what life looks like for me, um, I've become very even envious of a 7 because I'm like, I wish I could be that free thinking. I wish I could, be like, hey, let's have an adrenaline rush. Um, but no, for me, I'm like, I've got to get stuff accomplished. I've got to get stuff done. So that's that's just a side note. That has nothing to do with what I'm about to talk about you to them. Talk about them to you about. Um, for a 7 entering into a waiting season, it's going to affect them negatively, as it might for every type, because it's waiting seasons are like going against the grain of what we have planned. So there's going to be some negative effects that happen to us because it's like what's going on. Um, but for a 7, that negative effect is really going to happen emotionally and mentally more than physically. Uh, uh, they're gonna, how can I put this? They're gonna feel a whirlwind of negative emotions that they don't want to feel. Um, I, I, I wrote down for them that putting a spin, being in a positive outlook group for a 7 can look like escapism, not dealing with their problems, but escaping to the next adrenaline adrenaline rush moment, the next happy moment. Um, but if we know anything all too well, escapism doesn't serve anyone, no matter what your type is. Well, so interim waiting season for a 7 is going to amplify their need to find new things to do, new fun ideas, new fun activities to do, um, and never really sit with themselves through the pain of the season. Um, because liminal space, waiting seasons, and I use those terms interchangeably. But these moments in life invite pain for a purpose. The pain isn't there to just be pain. In these moments of life, when you're in a liminal space, when you're in a waiting season, that pain is there for a purpose. And that purpose is to help you learn, help you grow and mature. And I can say from personal experience, it's not a fun thing to experience, but working through things is so rewarding. Um, there have been some things I'm like, oh, this sucks. Why am I thinking about this? Why am I like, what is this? I hate the way that even thinking about this piece of me working through this trauma, these emotions. I hate how that even makes me feel. But working through it, coming to the other side of the tunnel, man, the pain has been rewarding. And I'm not a 7, but I will say, for any type really, if you can allow yourself to sit with your pain, you might feel more happy at the end than you did when you first began. I know I have so far, um, and still yet seeking a higher level of that attunement to happiness myself. But anyway, shall we move on to 8s? I think we shall. Right after I take a drink of this. So, we all know 8s are very expressive with their rage and anger. And in that same manner, an 8 is going to openly express their disdain for a waiting season. They're going to say, I don't like that I'm having to go through this. And they're going to do everything in their possible will to become independent and put this in quotes in my notes, try to separate themselves from the waiting season. But if an 8 takes a moment to pause and stop asserting the will against this waiting season and stop fighting it, then they might learn that this season is here to grow them, that this liminal space is here to help them gain independence. It's here to help feel their need and their sense of autonomy. Um, you're going to hear about this later in the season because this is on episode 2. The episode I did with Meredith is like episode 8, I believe. So it's a little ways down the road, but she's an 8. And I would just say, um, hearing her story of how waiting seasons and how she's kind of in a waiting season right now is actually kind of where I got this idea of maybe there's this generality to all 8s. And so I say what I just said about 8s because I've heard from an 8. And you'll keep this in mind if you're an 8, or if maybe you're just somebody like me who likes to learn about all the types. Keep this in mind when I just said about 8s, and when the episode releases, I promise you're going to see that same sense of like, hold on, just hold your cowbells. Take a moment. We'll see that sitting in the uncomfortableness and the silence and the solitude of a liminal space, sitting in this waiting season without trying to figure it out is so rewarding. Again, I go back to me. I'm a 3, and one of the things I've been doing is how can I make this season efficient? What can I do to come out on top on the other side. But those days have always been days when I'm in that mode of thinking. Those have always been the days that I go to bed the most tired because I've been not only running myself rampant physically, but also emotionally, mentally thinking through how I can be efficient. But on the other hand, the days where I just allow myself to reside in the flow of whatever life brings because I'm in this little space right now, it's almost like I can't go to bed because I have so much energy left. I've got to find a way to burn it off. And so again, just allowing yourself to sit and engage in your waiting season is so helpful. And as I'm thinking about this, um, there's something I used to do a couple of seasons ago. I used to actually take moments to breathe in these podcast episodes where we did a little breathing exercise. And I think I'm going to finish talking about all the nine types and how they enter wave season because we only have one more left with type 9. But I think that taking a moment to breathe for everybody who might be listening, I think that's a good thing to do today. So I'm going to talk about nines and then we're going to take a moment to breathe and then I'm going to start to close off the episode. So nines. Ooh, that slothfulness is a trap waiting to happen. So a nine really has to be careful and not allow themselves to fall asleep to themselves during a waiting season. And it's so easy to just fall asleep because one of the things I say a lot, and I've said this to a lot of guests I've recorded episodes with so far, is that the way I think about it is you're in a lazy river current. In a lazy river, there is no current. You're just slowly floating through the river. You're not paddling. There's no current to actually really take you fast enough. There's always a current in the river, but like a lazy river current if you can see my hand, it's like this. You really don't see the change that much. It is slow. It takes a while to get across the river if you're on a lazy river. Um, so that's what a waiting season, a liminal space time in life is often like. You're in this lazy river and you're just floating. And I don't know if you've ever been floating, if you've ever actually been in a moment where that's possible, but I've been on the river a couple of times on float trips, and there's moments where, of course, you got to paddle a little bit fast, but there's moments where you can just pull the paddles in and just relax. But you got to be careful, because those moments are easy moments to fall asleep because you're in nature and the river's just carrying you and you want to fall asleep. So it's very easy for a nine to fall asleep because slothfulness is already a part of their makeup. But then comes a waiting season, comes a little space time in life, and now not only are they mentally slothful, but physically, not to no fault of their own, they're slothful too because that's just where life has them. So it takes a lot of thinking, a lot of forward thinking to not fall asleep for a night. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about my phone wallpaper, and I'll talk about this again later because I talked about it in the episode with Gene Stevens, um, and how there's a quote in her book "What's Here Now," and I read the book through and through when I first got it, but then I was preparing for the conversation I had with her to record the episode a couple months ago for this season. So it's pre-recorded, but we recorded a couple months ago, and I was preparing for the episode, and so I was reading just that one chapter again to kind of pick out questions or pick out talking points to go through when we sat down. And the entire chapter. First of all, that chapter is called Waiting Rooms, Waiting Control. And so I read that chapter, but this was pre waiting season for me, so a prehistoric time. um, and so I actually told her this too. It's like I I read that when I first got the book, and I realized, oh, this is good information. But it really didn't click within me until I read it, and here I am experiencing what you're talking about in this chapter. That's when things start to really click. Oh, like, wow, light bulbs start shifting on. And actually, when those light bulbs start shifting on, is I was actually in a high school class because I'm a substitute teacher. And one of the nice things I like to do about high school is that it's a really chill day because it really just gives them an assignment, and then you're just sitting there, make sure they don't cause a fire. Um, but so a lot of times I go to high schools and I have a lot to get done. And so that way I can sit at the desk and really just work on what I have to get done, schoolwork, podcasting, whatever it may be, design, whatever. I can sit and get it done. But that's what I was doing this day. And I was working through some final preparations for a conversation with Gene. And it, that chapter just start clicking like never before, and light bulbs start coming on. And there was something she wrote in that chapter of the book. And it's now my phone wallpaper. So now, uh, actually, I went. I have a Snoopy wallpaper that I found on Google a long time ago. So I've had this wallpaper for years now. Um, but I read that this quote, and it's about how active waiting isn't like a still moment; it's an active conversation. Uh, and so it's like, wow, that is a good reminder. So I actually took my Snoopy wallpaper, put it in Canva, and then I typed that quote out. And so now every time I look at my phone, that quote is there to remind me that active waiting is a conversation. It's not just a moment of silence. So, and I was, and as I'm talking about nines, I'm reminded that because I think that's a good piece of advice for nines too, is to know that this isn't a moment to fall asleep. This isn't a moment to get silent. There will be opportunities for you to experience silent solitude, but for the most part, waiting seasons are a moment to allow the world to get silent so you can focus on yourself. But let's go a little bit further for nines. Waiting seasons, like I said, are meant to grow us as individuals, as people, as human beings. They aren't meant to harm us, but they are meant to whatever higher power you believe in gives them, so you can focus in on yourself and understand yourself more. But these seasons, these liminal spaces, can also stir a lot of internal conflict within ourselves. And here's the thing: nines naturally try so hard to distance themselves from any type of conflict, physical conflict, emotional conflict, mental conflict. Nines are going, just because this is their makeup, try their hardest to separate, to distance themselves from conflict. So here we are. If you're a nine, here you are entering a waiting season, and you're experiencing emotional conflict inside, mental conflict inside, a lot of internal conflict, and you want to run, but now it's not the moment to run. Now, again, like I said, for sevens and a lot of other types, now it's a time to sit and just say, hey, yeah, this is scary, but I've got to face you head on. You know, they say the best way to get over your fears is to face them head on. Now, I'm not advising you to go, like, if you're scared of a black bear, to go try to find a black bear. If you do that, let me know so I can call the cops, because you need to be put into a mental institution. But what I am saying is, You can't run from your emotions. And I take it from somebody who has tried for years, and then and even for years unintentionally, but then a couple years even intentionally run from emotions, run from the mentals of your human self. You can't run from them. So as scary as they may be, the best way to handle them, to handle your emotions, to handle your mental health, as scary as they may be, the best thing you could do is face them head on. The best thing you could do is just say, "Hey, I know this is scary, but I've gotta sit here. I want to run, but these internal monsters are coming at me. But no, I'm just gonna sit here. I'm gonna pull out my carpet. I'll sit here, and I'm just gonna allow them to come." And one of the things that I've learned in my season is that often and a lot of people do, and I know I'm not the only one, but often what we think of is that, hey, I've got to run because these big bad monsters are running after me. But I learned, and I'm gonna try to paint this very visually so you can actually see how I see it in my mind all the time. Even now, as I'm saying it, I'm getting a very vivid image of it. But here I am, and the inside of me, my inner being, of course, is dark in there because no, not because it's dark in there because the inner body is dark. Get your mind out of the wrong spots, okay, people? Uh, but anyway, it's dark, so you can't see. But my inner being is trying to run because there's this loud monster coming out. You're thinking this monster is just going to devour you. But one day, I decided, hey, I'm just going to pop a squat. So that's what my inner being did. And it's like you think the monster is going to devour you. And even as you sit down, he's running, rearing, he stops in front of you. He pokes his head out and his large mouth comes out and is still yelling. But then he sees your confidence and he's like, oh, wait, there's nothing I can do. Again, here's another visual. I'm a visual thinker, so I always give a lot of analogies, a lot of visual images to like help you see, to paint the picture because it helps me. So I always like to do it for other people too, even though they not be visual thinkers. But you just gotta deal with it, okay? This is my podcast. Uh, I'm kidding. Don't click off. I'm desperate. I need you to continue listening. Please continue to listen. But anyway, um, one of my favorite movies is It. Um, Spoiler alert, but not so much alert because these movies have been out for a while now. If you haven't seen it, that's on you. Um, but in It too, the thing they find out on how to get rid of Pennywise is like fear. Literally fear. They figure out that if they stop being scared, that their level of confidence would make Pennywise so fearful that he shrinks down. It's this idea that we talk about with students a lot in school about bullying. When somebody's bullying you, they're just trying to make you feel small. So the best way is to not react to them. The best way is to react with kindness to make them feel small with your kindness, not to bully them again, but by being kind. They're going to feel like, hey, there's nothing I can do to make this person feel small. So then they start shrinking themselves. It's reverse psychology, I know, but it's that idea. That's what's happening when you say, hey, I'm going to sit here with all the inner pain that I'm experiencing. I'm going to sit here with all this nastiness that is on the inside of me, and I'm going to show it. I'm bigger than it. Of course, it's dark in here, and this monster is running after me, and he seems like an 8 foot, 500 pound bear. But then he gets up there, and you see, you ain't nothing but a little chihuahua. And if you know chihuahuas are the smallest dog, but they have the most, like, they are the most fiercest dogs. It's like, calm down, you little small little chip. I can break you in half with my thumb. But chihuahuas are fierce. They're small though. Side point: big dogs are always so soft, but then the small dogs are always so angry. What's up with small things and anger? Okay, I am 5'4". Anyway, so yeah, for a 9, it's all about staying alert. And I was looking at my other notes I have on my iPad, and there's something I forgot to say about 8s, and so I want to back up a little bit and just ask this question: what would happen if you, as an 8 or an 8, what would happen if you just learned to respect this waiting season? Simple as that. Then for a 9, what would happen if you learned to stay alert during this waiting season? And so I'm gonna close out with 9s about this: is that if you all are careful and you stay alert, then that is a good thing. Because if you don't, then if you aren't careful, if you aren't alert, and again, I speak from experience because this is kind of where I am, where like I knew it was time for me to just take a step back and relax for a while, but I didn't. I kept on pushing, pushing, and pushing until finally life said, "Hey, you can't push no more. I'm gonna push you," um, type of thing. And so, if you aren't alert enough and aren't careful, as a 9, you can unintentionally prolong your waiting season because you're gonna fall asleep on that river and you're just gonna be floating. And you might float to the edge of a waterfall if you're not alert. So then again, you gotta find your way back. So that's why waiting seasons, actively waiting, is not a moment to close out everything. It's not a moment to shut down your laptop per se. You are the laptop. It's a moment to be active. Passive waiting. There's going to be moments and spurs of passive waiting in this liminal space that you're experiencing. But actively waiting is how you get through this liminal space. So it's a great time, right? I know. Well, that is all, like all 9 types and how they might enter and think, what they might think about in a relationship in as they enter a waiting season. Uh, but before I close out this episode, there's one last thing I would like to talk to you about. And that is the E and E collective. This is something I'm very passionate about because this is something that I initially was going to start back in 2022 because I was looking for a community to figure out and discuss emotions with. But then I also wanted to start an Enneagram cohort so I could like hear firsthand experience of how the Enneagram has taken effect in people's lives to kind of help format this podcast. Um, so I was like, hey, I want these two things. I can't really find neither of them. So I invented the Collective, which Enneagram and emotions, Enneagram plus emotions, or emotions plus Enneagram, however you want to say it, collective. So it's just that it's a collective that's all about talking about how emotions and the Enneagram are working in tandem to help us learn about ourselves and help us become better people. And so, um, the idea of this collective has expanded. Originally, it was an online community of 25 people around the world who would gather once a month on Zoom to discuss those two things: the Enneagram and emotions. But as I started to revisit this idea a couple months ago, I decided, how can I make? I was looking, how can I make this collective more than just a once a month thing on Zoom? So I came up with this. Of course, there's still the idea that I still once a month Zoom, but now everybody will be have the opportunity to meet with people from around the world if you're a part of the collective once a month. But then you also have we have a Discord server to have that continual access to community throughout the month, no matter if it's that like one night like session together or not. Um, but then I've also made like tiers. So one tier is the founders tier, and this thing, the founders option is only open until July 12th. That's the last day to register for the founders. It's 50 a year. But the thing about being a founder is, in addition to being a part of collective via Zoom and Discord, founders throughout the year can schedule as many one-on-one meetings, coaching sessions with me, or just they want somebody to talk with. Hit this link, schedule time, unlimited throughout the year. Founders also have the opportunity to um, be involved in training so that they can be a group leader for the entire like collective during a session, or even the idea is when this collective grows past 25 people that we will begin to split off into smaller like sections. There'll be founders who lead those groups, the smaller groups. But then also founders are basically like the board members of this collective, because they're going to be the ones who I look to for input on the future of the collective, how to mold this better. But then also founders have the ability to get access to the recorded Zoom sessions for free. Um, so there's a whole lot of perks to the founders, and for the founders and both for just the standard collective member, more perks will be added. But that's a whole lot for the founders just here in the very outset, and it's only 50 a year, so pretty inexpensive. But then to be just a standard collective member is $35 a year. But the thing about being a standard member is you get access to Zoom sessions and Discord server just as the founders do. But the only additional benefit that you get is that you get to meet with me one-on-one for whatever reason you may want to. But however many of those times you do is limited to 5 meetings a year. And so I have a tracker. So I'm very strict about this. You have 5. But here's the thing. If you don't use your 5 and you're a standing collective member, those 5 one-on-ones carry over to the next year less ones. So I say somebody is a standard collective member and they have 2 one-on-one sessions left that they didn't use for the year. Well, then the next, when their renewal period comes, they'll have 1 extra one-on-one for the next year. So instead of having 5 in the new year, after they renew their membership, they'll have 6. So, but if this sounds like something, and I hope it does, because like I said, this is a worldwide thing. It's open to anyone across the globe: United States, Mexico, Canada, Alaska, Hawaii. I realize I said United States, Hawaii, and Alaska, and those are states, but pay no mind to it. India, Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia, Russia. I don't know why I said Russia like that, but I did. I did it again. Anyone can be a part of this group. The idea is that you be English speaking or have an English translator, because I don't know. I'm gonna say it. I'm fluently English. I know Greek. Learning Swahili, learning French, learning Arabic, and learning Spanish. But I'm not fluent in Greek, Swahili, Arabic, Spanish, French enough to have conversations. So ideally, if you speak another language, you should also be able to speak in English. So I can truly connect with you, or at least have a way to translate what you're saying. Yeah, so that's the idea. But anybody is welcome. A non-discriminatory group. The only discriminatory thing is that you have to pay for it, and then it's only 25 spots. And within those 25 spots, there are only 10 founder spots. So 25, 10 of those are founders. If those 10 are taken before July 12th, sorry, but no more founder. Spots are open at this time. If those 10 are still open by July 12th, when the cutoff date for founders gets here, well, then the, whatever is left will be converted to standard collective member spaces. So, say there are 5 founder spots left over, and those 5 then become um, standards. So, instead of having 15 standards and 10, no, yeah, and 10 founders, you got 20 uh, standard and then 5 founders. So it's a whole complex. Let's see how that's working out. But I've also been thinking about maybe discounting founders. But anyway, but right now you can join as a founder, get a ton of benefits for $50 a year, or you can join as a collective member for $35 a year and get a few benefits by going to enneagramrestore.com/founder. Now that link is going to be in the show notes. So if you're on YouTube, just scroll down to this video description is going to be there. Or if you're on Apple Podcasts, scroll down there too. Enneagramrestore.com/founder is going to take you to the registration page for the founders. But if you look at the very bottom of that page, it's going to say, hey, click here if you want to register as a collective member. And that will then take you to the $35 a year option. So it's not the way I wish to handle that, but that was the best way to do it. So, but yeah, just go to enneagramrestore.com/founder. And again, that link and any other links that have been mentioned throughout this episode will be in the show notes as always for easy access, because I can't remember stuff, so why should you? I'm going to put it in the show notes, okay? Don't worry about it. I got you, friend. But with that being said, I think it's about time that I close out this episode, because I've said all that I've got to say for this episode of Enneagram Restored Podcast. Once again, thank you for listening. I appreciate every single person who supports this podcast by pressing play. But here's the thing. I do want to add more value to this podcast for you all, because that's it's going to increase listening. The more value, and you're going to enjoy it more, the more value I can add to it. But I will, in order for me to get this podcast to the level that I want to get to, I need your help. And so there are a few ways that you can help. One is by doing what you just did, pressing play, listening, watching the entire episode from beginning to end. Now, mind you, I don't care if you actually pay attention or not, because I do this sometimes too, just to help get the play counts up. I'll go on Apple Podcast, I'll press play on episode, turn the volume down, and just let it run until that episode is up, or until I've run the entire podcast again. I don't even listen to myself. Once these things are edited and published, I never listen to these anyway. I just turn my volume down on my phone, press play, let it run through so I get the play count up, and get my stats up so I can get sponsorships. And you can do that too. I would hope that you at least listen and watch these episodes once. But if you don't, that's okay. The least you could do is turn your volume down, press play, let it run from beginning to the end without stop. And I would greatly appreciate that, because that helps get the numbers up, and sponsors like numbers. So what you get ads and help me funnel revenue to the podcast and grow the equipment and everything. But speaking of revenue, there is an actual easy financial way you can do that. And you can do that by going to enneagramrestore.com/tip jar. And you can just give financially. We'll help cover equipment costs, lighting, to really add value and visual effectiveness, and really just give more production value to the podcast. Again, that's enneagramrestore.com/tip jar, TIPJAR. Like I said, that link is going to be in the show notes, because I can't remember half the time. I have to go look at my notes on what is all these links that I have. I have a whole lot of links. I have 3 different websites. I have my personal website, I have the podcast website, I have my InterDesign website. There's a whole lot of links I have to memorize. sometimes I don't memorize them. So I'm like, why should you have to memorize them? I'm gonna put that link in the show notes. So if you want to give, just go to the show notes, click that link, and there you go. But I understand if you don't, and I'm not gonna hate you if you don't, because you can also help grow this podcast by doing one simple thing, and that's leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Because, as I always say, I don't like to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So even if it is, hey, like, you suck, put it there. Let me know. I may not pay attention to you, but put it there. I like to know the good and the bad because that's how you improve. Again, sitting with the pain type of thing. But you can also do that by going to enneagramstart.com/review. But again, friend, I got you. All these links, don't even worry about trying to memorize them. Try to write them down. Because all you got to do is scroll down to the bottom of these show notes and click the link you need for the action you want to take. That's enneagramstart.com/review to leave a review or rate on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Because when you do that, it helps people find the podcast because it says, hey, this is an amazing podcast hosted by a fun, handsome, sexy black man. And everybody needs to see his face. I'm kidding, no, but I am pretty sexy. I can cook, I can clean, and I like kids. I don't know why I'm still single. That's a good question. But anyway, moving on. And another way you can help add value and support this podcast is by following and subscribing to Enneagram Start Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, and yes, we're on Facebook as well. And we're now on TikTok as well until TikTok is still in the United States. Congress is trying to shoot it out. So as long as TikTok is available in the United States, we'll be on there posting little snippets of the show. So all of our social media handles are Enneagram Start Podcast. That's Enneagram Restored Podcast. No spaces, no special letters, just ENNEAGRAMRESTORED Enneagram Restored Podcast across Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. That's another way you can help grow and support and add value to the podcast by following, subscribing to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And I think I've covered all the ways. There's a whole lot of ways you can help support this podcast. But whichever way you choose to support this podcast, I want you to know this. I will be eternally and forever grateful for your support. So, with that being said, until next time, my friend, I want you to remember this, that the Enneagram doesn't define you, but it does bring restoration. It helps reshape your thinking and habits.